All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is now 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and we are getting ready to launch into our TRX webinar series for today. My name is Scott Deutsch, and I'm the Communications and Brand Manager for America Makes and NCDMM. And I welcome everybody that's logging in. I see a few of you, and I see it looks like a couple people are still coming on board. So welcome. If you are logging in, you are here for the TRX webinar series, Additive Manufacturing for Executives Level 1. It is December 12th. You should be seeing a screen on your WebEx on your device with the red, white, and blue America Makes logo and branding, a photo of me, and the title. If you're not seeing this, please post your concern in the Q&A, and we'll try to get you where you need to be. Go ahead and get started. It is 1 minute past, and just a little bit of brief about who America Makes is. I know a lot of you probably have an understanding of who America Makes is already, but just a brief background on who we are. America Makes was launched as a public-private partnership in 2012 with funding coming from the United States Department of Defense as well as other agencies, U.S. Department of Commerce, the National Science Foundation, NASA, as well as others. And we have been driven by the same mission since we launched. That mission is to be the accelerator for the adoption of additive manufacturing technologies in the United States, providing us global competitiveness in this emerging and establishing technology, advanced manufacturing technology. Just a little bit about today's webinar. Going to ask all of our participants, all of the attendees, if you have questions for our presenters, in the WebEx screen, you will see a Q&A area. Please post any questions that you have in the Q&A area on your screen. Do not post them in the chat window. Put them in the Q&A so that our panelists can see them and then respond to them. We will generally have the panelists present, and then we will respond to questions at the end. However, if any of the panelists feel compelled to answer questions on the fly, they may do so indeed. Again, my name is Scott Deutsch, and I welcome you to the America Makes TRX webinar series, Additive Manufacturing for Executives, Level 1. Today's presenters, we have three powerhouse presenters here. This couldn't be a better day for you to join us. We have Dr. Mohsen Sefi from ASTM International, who will be kicking it off today for us. We have Dr. Ankit Saharan from EOS North America, who will also be presenting, and then followed by Kasia Witkowski from HP. So this is going to be an exciting event as we dive into the world of additive manufacturing for executives. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Dr. Sefi from ASTM, and he is going to get us started. Thank you all again for joining.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'm based in Washington, D.C., so for those of you who are in Eastern Time, good afternoon. For others, good morning, good evening. So as you probably have seen from the description of this webinar, this is meant to be an introductory webinar looking at fundamentals a little bit, or an overview of additive manufacturing, I would say, for kind of non-technical senior executives. So the contents essentially are geared toward those individuals in those organizations. So a quick overview of this presentation you'll see here. I'll start off very briefly with an overview, an introduction to the technology. I guess you probably are familiar with the technology, how it evolved and where we are today, but I'll get into some of those details. I'll then describe a little bit more about the technologies, how, what are the limitations, what are the advantages, how small we can make things, or how big you can go, and what kind of materials you'll be able to use, and things like that. And then I'll get into some of the landscape and essentially looking at what has happened in the past, where we are today, and what's coming next. And following by providing some input on the challenges and opportunities on the adoption of technology, standardization, issues as well as qualification and certification. I'll end with a brief overview of what ASTM does and what are we trying to accomplish in supporting the industry being able to adopt this technology as a much faster and safer way. So a little bit of introduction about additive technologies in particular. So as you can imagine, this technology is meant to allow you make objects in 3D. So there are a lot of promises, as you have probably seen, for this technology that enable new business models to be created. It allows us to make things that are not possible to do it in any other way. Essentially, it's a joining technology that makes you possible to print or create objects out of a 3D CAD file. I'll get into that in a second, but essentially, in some ways, it's disrupting the way that we make things because it allows us to design complex geometries, it allows us to reduce weight significantly, and essentially really redefine how we design products. So as a result of these freedom in design, you have new applications, you have new specific areas that you can get into, which you couldn't do in the past. And it can also potentially get us into sustainability mode in a lot of different industries. So essentially, as you can see, and you can imagine, there are advantages, but there are also limitations. So the biggest promise of AM technology is that allowing you more freedom to design things. But this freedom is not free. It comes at a cost. But also you're able to mass customize a variety of different products in ways that you couldn't do in the past. Reduce time to market, reduce tooling significantly, and also reduce the supply chain and lead time. In the past, if you were to have long lead time in order to have a components arrive at your location or your field, you would have need to have really a large supply chain, lots of lead times. But this technology has the potential to significantly reduce that, but also allow you to really reduce the material usage significantly, reduce the scrap rate, buy-to-fly ratios, and things like that. But at the same time, there are some limitations. As we evolve within this technology and industry, these limitations may adjust, may evolve too. So at the moment, there are limited materials that you can reliably print. But as I mentioned, constantly this field is changing, new materials always becoming available. So that's exciting. There is capital cost that is associated with the technology. There are speed issues. You have to set your expectation. Still, the technology is getting evolved over the time. Labor-intensive post-processing issues. It's not that you get the part out of the machine that you can use it next day. You have to also do several post-processing steps. And obviously, they're all lack of a skilled workforce, which is a big challenge and limiting factor. Now, in a nutshell, whatever technology that you're looking at within the AM domain, you always start with a CAD file essentially, and this sequence that you can see here is more or less valid during the process. So you start with a CAD file, your design file essentially, then you convert it into another file format that have some of the attributions of your CAD files. There are a variety of different versions or types of file formats, essentially. STL is one example. There are other examples that are coming on board or already came. And then you go into build preparation to determine the location, orientation of your parts, and so many different characteristics that you can plug into, change different knobs and things like that. Then you get into your machine system setup, building the file, and removal following by post-processing in order to make it available for your application. There is a lot going into this. It's not the whole thing, but in a nutshell, that's how essentially AM technologies work. Now, there are early adopters for this technology. As you can imagine, lots of investment came originally and initially from aviation, aerospace, and defense. So that's why we see applications, numerous applications in those areas, but also in medical field, we've seen applications. I think the first The first real product that has been certified by FDA goes back to over 10 years ago, right around 2007. And we have over 100 parts that have been certified according to FDA that are in use at the moment. But again, it largely depends on your application, the criticality of your application, and where you're going to use this technology. Regulation involves, and lots of details. But if you look at this, early adopters start with aviation, medical, following by, we see lots of applications, automotive, oil and gas, and also consumer products and things like that. Now, the question always comes to mind, how small you can go and how big you can make things. If you look at the next chart, essentially, I tried to really capture, give you a little bit of a sense on the scale of things that you can make. You can make things really small. Micromechanical, microelectromechanical systems or gears that can really be functional. You can make those things with a number of AM technologies. You can go all the way to large tanks that are being used in space applications, for example. In between, you will see the maturity of technology over the time, as well as in the length of scale. So the first, for example that is very famous is this T sensor that was designed by G Additive and got into the field, received FAA approval. And you can also see other examples such as the brackets, less critical applications, and even we get into higher critical areas like wings that, for example, engine makers are trying to implement into engine technologies. And more recently, we see with the promise of design freedom that AM provides, you can even make things at a much larger scale for the aircraft cabin, essentially. It can significantly reduce the weight of your aircraft. So these can get into meters scale. So from millimeter scales or meso scales, you can get into micro scales and then macro scales, as you can see here. So the maturity of technology is evident as we move forward. Now, in terms of materials type, you see different kinds of material types that are available that you can print. You can print polymer, plastics materials, metals, ceramics, paper, sand, even wood material. It comes in different forms, in different forms of powders, wires, inks, variety of different shapes and forms depending on what technology you use. In 2011, ASTM International published the first standard terminology for additive manufacturing, which essentially is the first step to really get us all talking the same language. So at that time, we categorized AM technology into 7 major ones, as you can see here, all the way from binder jetting, material extrusion, to powder bed fusion, directed energy deposition, and so on. And each of these technologies have unique characteristics that make them really, in a way, separate and differentiate them from the others. That more or less, most of the technologies that you see that are out there are considered under one of these categories. Obviously, there are new technologies that are always coming in, but there are justifications also for these 7 categories and how they are being expanded and how we can add new categories, which we can get into in the Q&A. Now, you can imagine also each of these technologies are able to utilize different feedstock, polymers, metals, ceramics predominantly, but depending on which one you look at, there are different limitations as well as opportunities that exist. Now, moving into technology readiness level, you might ask, okay, where are we with respect to key industry sectors? It all really depends also which sector are we talking about and what kinds of applications. This study was conducted a couple of years ago, but it's still more or less we see the trend, essentially. So in aerospace, if you look at the TRL, in general, we are between 5 to 7, but there are applications, there are organizations that are 9 and 10 on a specific application. It's not really generalized. We can't say, for example, in a highly critical engine component, we are now solved it and resolved all the issues. No, there are issues that still requires research and innovation. So in tooling application, lots of progress, and we more or less are really at a high TRL. Essentially, in medical, as I mentioned, we've seen significant amount of progress, and we can, on average, say that we are anywhere between 7 to 10. Again, it totally depends and relies on specific applications that we're talking about. But the trends is still more or less is valid. In automotive, we see that there are different requirements, essentially, different things that are involved, but that's how we see automotive and transportation, essentially. Now, in general, looking back at the landscape, where we were and where we are today, you can come up with some of the ideas here, essentially. In the past, the technology was really came at a high cost. And there was a high degree of customization for applications that really promised justification of this cost. There was also challenges in the low quantity print production capabilities. Not always we could meet high volume productions, but things are starting to change. At the moment, we see gradually a reduction in the cost of the technology, equipment cost, capital cost, material cost as well. So it started to really make sense for some of the other industry sectors, for example, transportation, heavy machinery, and others. And then we also see significant increase in the throughput of the machines. The cost of lasers gone down, and we see the birth of multi-laser systems in order to increase the productivity. And market tends really towards going to high mix of low volume providers that require further justification. Now, in the future, will really allow us to significantly increase the adoption of this technology is bringing trust into this technology. And one of the ideas, or one of the ways to bring your trust into technology, is a standard, essentially. And being able to meet the regulations, being able to satisfy regulatory requirements, I think really make this technology much more viable. It can reduce significantly the supply chain, and it become very useful for on-demand applications and beyond. Now, in addition to that, there are some challenges and opportunities I would like to highlight here. In terms of technical challenges, again, this depends on the application and which sector you're looking at. Lack of talent and the current expertise is quite evident. There's lack of awareness and understanding on when to use the AM. If you can make something with AM, that doesn't mean you have to do it. In using additive technology, it really requires justification. And also, as I mentioned in the past, printer speeds and the speed of technology is still, it's a challenge. Always AM OEMs are working on it. Uncertainty on the quality of the final part, repeatability of the process. Those are some of the other challenges that we still see on the technical side. As I indicated, lack of regulations and standards, that's quite evident. In the commercial side, again, cost is a huge driver. We have to start with identifying a business case. If economically it makes sense, we definitely can justify the use of this technology. There are lots of intellectual property issues and protection around the technology. Export control is a huge topic right now as well. How do we really make sure that technology becomes safe, and the investment that we are putting in, especially in the defense organizations, really maintains within us insurance cost and the need of really change in the mindset. We have to think differently if we really want to utilize this technology in a safer way. Now, getting into qualification and certification, as I mentioned, there has to be lots of investment in order to get us efficiently into the certification area. So at the moment, industry is spending a lot of money in bringing internal documents, creating process qualifications, material specifications. Large organizations can afford that, but it can't be sustainable. On the left side of the spectrum, you can imagine societies, consortia that allow you really to invest within the ecosystem to be able to put together qualification data, standards, material specifications that can get you faster to the right side of the spectrum, which is certification. What really is really is demanding right now is how can we get to the certification at a much faster pace. So if you look at this, I think not everybody amongst the industry has the capability or the investment amount that needs to go into these different regulatory demands. But working with societies and consortia such as America Makes and others, I think we can significantly reduce the cost of getting into being ready for certification and qualification. So standards now can be a huge enabler and help and in order to get you to the certification and regulatory acceptance. Standard can ensure your process control, can ensure that your quality is consistent, can reduce the risk of investment, can also reduce the cost, facilitate trade and larger adoption, and get you to the certification and assurance. That's why a number of organizations are involved in the standard development processes in order to really ease the way towards qualification, certification, and regulatory acceptance. Now, the last part of this quick presentation is about ASTM and how we can help in order to support the AM ecosystem. ASTM has been around for over 120 years. We create standards. We are a standard developer for over 90 industry sectors. We have 150 committees, over 12,500 plus standards covering a variety of industry sectors. Our presence is global. We have operations in a variety of different countries. Our standards are being used all around the world. According to World Trade Organization, we are within the process compliance of principles of WTO. So what really makes us unique is the process. It's an industry-driven process, market-based, consensus-based, and also voluntarily. That means you can participate in this process regardless of the type of your organization. Your vote can count towards development of a standardization, standards essentially. Now, when it comes to additive manufacturing, we have a number of committees involved here. Over 20 of our committees provide standards directly or indirectly towards support of additive manufacturing. In particular, we have a committee F42 established in 2009. This is the oldest committee out there. We started talking about this where really nobody was talking about the critical issues that exist in the regulatory space as well as qualification certification. We have a very unique collaboration in place with international organization, standard organization, ISO. So we are trying to really avoid duplication, and so we work very closely together to make sure that there are standards that are recognized globally, and we just don't contradict or duplicate each other. A number of agreements and strategic relationships are also in place. In particular, we have an MOU with America Makes since 2013, being one of the standard developer in the field, helping transitioning research and development information into standards. Now, as I mentioned, this committee in particular, established in 2009, over 800 members are involved in this, technical experts. We've created over 20 standards, 40 plus in development. We meet twice a year. Our last meeting, in fact, was in Paris. The next meeting will be in Texas, El Paso at University of Texas. There are a number of subcommittees involved and focus areas ranging from testing methodologies, design and data, materials and processes, environmental health and safety, and also application-based standards. Over 30 countries are also involved in this development. Now, we know that standardization in general are not fast because you need to bring the community up to speed, up to the same page as well as into consensus. Because of that, it takes time. But also there's always challenges in these emerging technology areas, availability of research and data that can allow us to put together standards. In order to resolve that, ASTM supported establishment of a center of excellence, that this center is committed to support creation of globally accepted standards, but also contributes into education and workforce development and supporting next generation of AM professionals. With that, I will stop here and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mohsen. We now have Ankit Saharan from EOS North America, who's going to take over the presentation at this point. Any attendees have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of your screen. Standards certainly are a big part of the adoption strategy for additive across the spectrum. And thank you very much, Mohsen, for your input. I'm good. We'll turn it over now to EOS North America and Dr. Saharan.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I just continue on what Mohsen said, and I think I can answer specific questions to laser-based processes on powder bed fusion, whether from a polymer and a metal side, which is where EOS is a major OEM in. So, but before we do that, just a quick question that we always get is why do we want to get into additive manufacturing? Can you guys see my screen? Sorry, is that okay? Okay, I should be on slide number 27. I just want to make sure.
Yep, we're seeing, I'm seeing it at least.
Okay. Thank you. So the question on the why the additive manufacturing from a production standpoint or from a business model standpoint is that it gives you a greater manufacturing efficiency, makes your manufacturing models more robust so that you can, there's a possibility of removal of multiple tooling and material requirements. And even when you look towards the future, you can design specific part and a specific material property to a local area. So, and it can even offer from design optimization as well, where you want to lightweight your parts, you want to make them more personalized products, or you want to do from a custom use cases or design cases for specific aerospace or medical application. It's even going further in serial production where mass customization in general, when it was too expensive, not possible, now it becomes more accessible. Where it means that we can even do greater decentralized manufacturing. So you need not need to have huge inventory and brick and mortar warehouses maintained, where you can actually maintain a digital inventory, even for legacy parts that no longer have existing suppliers or qualified suppliers, and even don't even have drawings in some cases that we worked on with some of our DoD customers, that we scanned the parts of the existing from existing applications and kind of recreated those, and given that robustness and the ability for our customers to recreate those parts and basically create a sustainable path, whether that part needed now or whether that's part needed 50 years from now, it essentially increases the life of a program, and even goes beyond from a customization where now from a consumer market, from an end market standpoint, people are demanding that it needs to be more personal. It needs to be more specific to them. So additive manufacturing gives the possibility of making that a reality. Whether it's that every insole of every person is different, so everything could be designed to them. In a similar way, every medical implant is dependent on every person's anatomy, and it could be designed to that specific thing. Then if I'm looking at different technologies in AM, I feel that most of the technologies are all complementary to each other. And now this is just focusing on the metal side of things, where you have metal binder jetting, direct energy deposition, electron beam melting, and laser melting. So this is where Mohsen was earlier suggesting too, was laser powder bed fusion, one of the ASTM terminologies that they devised so everyone kind of speaks the same language. Unfortunately, we're all commercial organizations. We still tend to use trademarks. But one thing is very important to understand is that it's very easy to fall into the trap of comparing metal binder jet to laser melting, or comparing direct energy deposition to electron beam melting. It has to be understood that every technology is basically dependent on every application. An application which is suitable for direct energy deposition might not be suitable for binder jetting, or the application which is suitable for laser melting might not be suitable for electron beam melting. And what we want to basically say is that the choice of the technology is essentially dependent on the applications that are at hand. And but the quintessential idea that we talk about additive manufacturing is basically that it gives the power of individuality, it gives the idea to basically transform any idea to a reality. Not only from an engineering or a technical standpoint, but also from a business or from an overview, from a strategic standpoint, by creating new business models. Most people say that additive manufacturing disrupts supply chain. I personally think it doesn't disrupt existing supply chain. It basically makes them more robust. It strengthens your supply chain. It reduces your risk, and it just creates it's basically additional tool in your toolbox, which you can go and make your ideas into reality. But if I just focus on the laser part really quickly, all we do is basically create parts from light, which is laser, sand, which could be metal or polymer powder, and basically thin air, which could be argon or nitrogen or inert atmosphere for laser machines, or vacuum for electron machines. But the idea is that this is the education and the skill and what we need to train our engineers for is one of the essential facts that gives power to the additive the idea of additive manufacturing. It not only enables transformation of people, but it basically changes the way people think and actually create endless possibilities to change how we work, how we live. I know it's getting a bit idealistic here, but just imagine that every engineer or designer can bring his idea to a reality. Basically, this will make them truly believe that they can have an impact on this world, and sometimes it's very powerful and a very motivating force for the engineers and the designers and anyone out there. So one example, what I'd like to put out quickly out here is a launcher part. You might have seen this on a LinkedIn post a couple of times, but the idea from bringing, again, ideas to reality. So it basically took them about 12 to 18 months, which would, to create a nozzle like this from conventional means would have taken them about 12 to 18 months. With additive, they could have a part in their hand in about 35 hours, basically go and retest it, see if there are any design changes that need to be done, go back to the machine, and 35 or 40 hours later have another part in their hand. It kind of makes ideas, not only ideas a reality, but kind of make the product development a lot faster as well. And also create so many possibilities that you can have really cooling channels going through this part, which cannot be done in any other way, which increases the efficiency of your part and basically creates a whole new application that never existed before. And if we look at, and the question sometimes we always ask is like, what basically is a highly innovative part, whether from a legacy standpoint or from a design standpoint? And I think it's a combination of a complex geometries, customization, and functional integration, where we can have lightweighting or lattice structures, and we can have new and complex designs, especially conformal cooling going into existing tooling applications, or we're talking about combining assemblies, combining different parts to create one single assembly that reduces a lot of cost, or we're talking about patient-specific restorations in the medical market, or we're talking about customized products. So at the intersection is what we call a highly innovative part. And I think even today, after so many years in additive, even though it's a nascent stage, this is still something that is very few existing in the industry today. But that's what the power is, that more application and innovative parts are made, the more we can actually go after targeting these applications. And if I'm looking at the shifting in the production chain, it basically provides, instead of creating one part over and over and over again, it gives you the flexibility of making different parts at different time. It gives you, your production runs can go smaller, and it can actually be more economic. So your value or your cost of your production run is no longer dependent on how many parts you're making. You can actually go from actually distributed manufacturing instead of one central hub where all the parts are getting manufactured to different places over the globe, and actually can have truly on-demand manufacturing. Now, if we look towards all the intersection of this is something what we call a digital manufacturing cell, and this is something that we strive for to actually have in our customer base, and we hope that we can adapt someday. Now, if we look at the advances in aerospace, airplanes have come from far away. From aircrafts, we have come from biplanes to turbofans to engines that power most of the commercial flight today. But however, most of the airplanes would want to make their parts lighter and would want to save on fuel costs to make it more to make commercial aviation more sustainable. So if we just look at one part, this is a 320 Airbus 320 nacelle hinge that was done in a conventional way. And if we just look at from a 3D printed standpoint, we can create a completely topology optimized bracket, a hinge that is about 35% lighter and about reduces the assembly of components from 10 or 15 components to basically just one single part. That brings a lot of savings in fuels. That brings a lot of savings to sustainability programs. And this is just one part. Imagine you've got about millions of parts in an aircraft. This is one part that's bringing in savings. Imagine what if it's applied to even 10 or 20% of the parts in an aircraft. That's going to bring huge cost savings to the industry. If you're looking at functional integration, instead, this is an example of an injector head. So instead of actually having 248 individual injectors in a rocket, you can basically print them all in one piece and actually save cost, not only in terms of assembly, but also reduce points of failure in your parts, because the number of joints and brazings and weldings you have, the more number of failure points you have. So that kind of helps with reducing a lot of failure that you can have in your parts and actually give you a part which is more robust, more reliable, can actually last longer in service. And if we look at from a business validation standpoint, this is an example that we went through with one case where a business model can be created in a very short time scale that you can basically, for example, in this case, a customer scan can easily be done. It can easily be converted into a CAD file, and it can easily be converted into 3D STL and actually printed in a machine. And all of these parts could actually be made for every person specifically. So it's an excellent example of mass customization that's possible. Not only that, if we actually work towards more of a digital inventory or digital spare parts, like I said earlier, we need not maintain huge inventories of parts and huge brick and mortar store. We can basically create digital inventories that's going to help us reduce costs. That's going to help us reduce. The parts on hand. It's going to help us reduce a lot of shipping costs as well as moving parts from one place to another. Now, the question we are always asked is, if this is a state of the art, what does the future of the technology hold? And that's a very difficult question to answer because this technology is evolving rapidly. So we can only present in the future of about 1 to 2 years time frame. What's this technology is going to look in 5 to 10 years? We really don't know. Just from an example, like about 15 years ago in laser powder bed fusion, there were only 4 or 5 handful companies in the world that were actually making machines of this technology. But right now, as of today, I think I counted this morning about 25 different OEMs actually making machines for this specific technology. So this is something that we're seeing as an explosion of growth and options for customers to basically choose from as well. But when we talk about the future, it's essentially 3 parts. One is from a materials and processes standpoint, where we're talking about high-strength aluminums, where we're talking about metal matrix composites, whether we're talking about more lightweight alloys or basically functional alloys like high-entropy alloys or bulk metallic glasses. That basically changes the game and actually creates more application that can be done. So we could have in the future, sometime we could see magnesium alloys come to the market. We could have bronze come back into the market, INVAR 36 for satellite and other applications, copper. We can actually even have improved surface finishes of existing parts and even have more faraway research where we start to incorporate nanotechnology into additive manufacturing, by having carbon nanotubes embedded into an aluminum matrix to create a unique part with a different high strength. But most of these alloys, one way or the other, we talk about are basically existing alloys. The true form lies when we're talking about an alloy which doesn't exist today, that actually truly goes after the advantages of this technology. And this is something that we truly feel is going to change the game. And there's a research going on across OEMs, across universities, into creating a number of these alloys. Not only in the aluminum, but we're talking about coppers, we're talking about duplex steels, we're talking about even nickel and cobalt chromium superalloys. Now we talk about on the machine side, so this is an example where we're talking about a meter-sized part coming to the fore. And this is basically, again, the company was called Launcher that was actually be able to print this part. And this, now we're talking about scaling in size of the machine and the scaling of size, whether it's in terms of lasers or whether it's in terms of efficient beam delivery or efficient energy delivery systems, so we can make the parts not only faster, but bigger and better. I think that's one of the existing technologies, one of the existing advantages of this technology, like we said, it's a trend we see in the near term. But the base part, the good thing is that this technology, like I said, it's a tool in your toolbox. The basic thing, and the good thing comes is that when you can combine it with an existing technology, like a conventional one. So in this case, that same launcher nozzle that was printed in copper was basically sprayed with Inconel 718 to form a bimetal jacket around to have an excellent cooling part. And it basically even, this not only double the efficiency, but actually created a part in this class like no other. Like no other part can actually achieve the efficiency of the thrust that this part can. So this is an excellent case where we combine additive with a conventional form of manufacturing to create something which is truly unique. And if we're talking about the future in terms of course, we cannot forget the software part, which is going to make this all happen, is where we have these additive manufacturing machines talk to subtractive manufacturing machines to form an interconnected web of machines and network that can talk not only to each other, but also talk to each other on basis. So you can actually create digital inventory of parts where you create a part in the US and design the part in the US, but to print the part out in the field somewhere in Australia or somewhere in Japan where the part is actually needed, and actually do it in a way while maintaining the integrity of the data security of the parts as well. We're talking about data analytics. We're talking about how incident at one side of your machine can predict how it's going to go on the other side. So it's a connected manufacturing that we're going after from the software side that we see is going to impact a lot on the adoption of this industry. So with that, I I want to end my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions towards the end. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Dr. Saharan. That's very good information. So for those attendees, so we heard from ASTM on our as an organization that's establishing standards and providing education and workforce development. And the need for standardization as we adopt these new technologies. We heard from one of our industry partners that supply that technology to the marketplace. And we're going to hear now from Kasia Witkowski from HP, who's going to tell us a little bit more from another industry partner from the industry side, another technology provider. So it looks like we're just getting the...
yeah, well, technical difficulties here. Oh, and I promise we'll try to be, I think we're running a little long, so I'll try to be short and sweet so we allow for questions.
Yes,
but I do know
Kasia's got a quick stop at 2 o'clock, but please, if you have questions, we will get them answered. So Kasia, if you're ready, I'll leave it to you.
Yep, I think we're waiting. Somebody's skipping ahead in slides here.
Yeah, it looks...
my section. But anyway, just before we get to the slide, I just want to reintroduce myself. Again, I'm Kasia Witkowski, and I'm the Director of Government Relations at HP. So since HP has only started investing in additive manufacturing since 2015, I wanted to take a minute to update you on where your favorite U.S. computer and printer company plays in the additive space. And so HP's multi-jet fusion portfolio of 3D print solutions, oh, here we go. So the question is, do I have control?
Do you have it?
There we go.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. So again, we use multi-jet fusion, and our portfolio allows for prototyping, production. We're in plastics and metals, and it's seeing strong consumer adoption across numerous industries, including transportation, medical, and consumer. In fact, more than 18 million parts were produced on HP multi-jet fusion machines in the last 12 months alone. So we've also established the HP Digital Manufacturing Network, which is a global community of HP production partners with the capabilities to help design, produce, and deliver both plastic and metal parts at scale, leveraging our 3D print solutions. So many companies look to the digital manufacturing service providers to help speed development of new products, shorten time to market, create leaner supply chains, and reduce their carbon footprint. So we believe the network is a critical first step to integrate disruptive 3D printing solutions into an organized supply and demand ecosystem, but it must factor standards, regulations, and robust quality management to help industry pioneers embark on their digital transformation journey. So what we wanted to talk about today are sort of the technical challenges, right? My peers have focused on what's been done to prove the value of additive manufacturing, but now we have to talk about what needs to be done, and I know both of them touched on them, but I think before we step into that technical work, it's important to realize that these achievements can't be reached by one part of the additive manufacturing ecosystem, so government, industry, and academia have to work together for true success. And this is part of the reason why America Makes is so powerful. They have the ability to convene all of these parts and to make sure that the U.S. additive manufacturing remains on the forefront of the world's work. So just quickly, for those of you who may not be familiar with America Makes, there's over 230 members, and that's made up of large industries, small and medium size, 40 different academic institutions, 17 government entities, 14 nonprofits, and then 7 manufacturing extension partnerships. So a pretty robust system. So now that we have a sense of the players that are key to success, let's talk a bit about a few of the technical challenges which we still have to work through. The one point I do want you to remember after this presentation, though, is while there is still work to do for full adoption, we have many talented individuals and organizations and governments working to help ensure that an additive manufacturing system factors in standards, regulations, and robust quality management. No one is looking to skip that step. It's just as Mohsen mentioned earlier, standards and qualifications are just sort of a slow process is how we work, but we're all here dedicated to move it forward. So 3 of the topics I just want to briefly touch on are standards, workforce, and then potential legislative or regulatory constraints. And so keep in mind, each of these topics could easily be a 60-minute presentation on their own and cover the breadth of the work, but today is just meant to give you sort of a brief moment to whet your appetite on the issue, and America Makes, I believe, is going to do some follow-up conversations on this in the future. So the first, component that we're going to look at are standards. And luckily, America Makes has created an advisory group of those over 230 members to focus on standards. Now, they as an advisory group aren't writing the technical standards, but they're coordinating with the appropriate entities and working to ensure everybody's looking at sort of the long-term strategy, big picture, and that there's no duplication. They have, however, identified a few technical areas where they think work needs to be done. That's in design, process and materials, qualification and certification, non-destructive evaluation, and maintenance and repair. So on this slide, there are two links. I'm not sure if when this is recorded, if you'll be able to click those, but these are also both available on America Makes website. But I want to point out the roadmap that is sort of a timeline and strategy for the development of these critical standards. So if you're interested in learning more, that's a great place to start. And then the second piece is the standards landscape, which shows you current standards and how they relate to sort of the full adoption of the roadmap. So again, it's really great that America Makes is focused and has created this advisory group to really move things forward. The second piece is workforce and education. So as both of my peers mentioned earlier, we need to ensure that there is a workforce prepared with the skills for additive manufacturing. And the answer is right now, unfortunately, it is not prepared for that. But again, America Makes has pulled together a great advisory group of its membership to focus on some very important issues to really sort of take individual projects and sort of best practices and bring them to scale. So while they do a lot of work, there's sort of 4 different examples we'll touch on here. The first is validating existing requirements and creating new ones where needed. So America Makes has worked with a couple of other entities and done the advanced curriculum in additive design, engineering, and manufacturing innovation. We're very good at small acronyms here. And it's a comprehensive set of immersive training experiences with advanced additive manufacturing curriculum. It's delivered in an intense hands-on environment, and it's integrating skills from multiple disciplines employed in design for additive manufacturing processes. The second step is promoting and updating credentialing programs. What's most important for all of these is when an employer is looking to either hire a new employee or train and get their current employees to a certain certification set, we want to ensure they know who they're hiring and what the skill sets are that they bring. So they're very focused in that area. Then they're also looking to create some custom tailored training. So you'll see in the third box here, America Makes and a few of their partners have held over 30 different trainings for over 500 members of the DoD. They're holding these intensive boot camps, but it's ranging from war fighters to engineers to technicians to contractors. So it really shows you the breadth of who is needed, right? There's an entire ecosystem here from design all the way through production and logistics that we need to make sure is ready for this. And then I think the last piece where the advisory group is strong is bringing together opportunities to promote and convene people who have the expertise and the best practices, again, to sort of bring those to scale from small individual programs that one individual or one academic institution might be working on, but really bring them forward and to scale for the broader good. So the one last piece we did want to touch on is the worry of some legislative or regulatory changes that could hinder U.S. additive manufacturing industry. And so please do not misunderstand this. We understand the critical importance that government holds to ensure national security and not allowing bad actors across the globe to access vital technology. We do not question that premise whatsoever. But what this advisory group at America Makes, the Government Relations Advisory Group, their key role here is to ensure that companies and technologies aren't stifled by unintended consequences that would remove the U.S. as a world leader to these most critical technologies that really keep us ahead. So one example we wanted to share with you is the America Makes Government Relations Advisory Group had been tracking. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security put out a proposed rule regarding potential new export controls on emerging technologies. They named 14 different technologies. Additive manufacturing was one of those. And so knowing that if these controls were too broad in the final copy of this regulation, this could have detrimental impacts across the entire industry. So the advisory group asked America Makes if they would provide public comments from all components of the industry. They agreed to do so, and those were submitted in January of this year, so of 2019. And since then, America Makes leadership has really taken a strong role to providing to the Department of Commerce and other entities, because while they're the main government regulator, they're also working with DOD, DOE, and other relevant entities to be a resource for them and to provide information. You know, this is, industry doesn't always know what government's doing, government doesn't always know what industry is doing, but America Makes can be that nice hand to connect them all and to really make sure they can help government understand the details, what the true capabilities are out there, sort of where industry is moving, so that we can ensure that, you know, again, there aren't those unintended consequences of too broad of a regulation. So again, America Makes is this advisory group is tracking the potential impacts of this rule and how this plays out, but then looking for others. So I know this was a very brief overview and some very complex issues, but we hope this piques your interest and you'll stay connected with America Makes for future resources. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you all to ensure the U.S. remains the dominant leader in additive manufacturing.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kasia. And I know you've got a quick burn today, so you've got to get going. I appreciate your support of all of us at America Makes. Appreciate your support and the words that you've just given us all. There are a couple questions that have come up during the presentations, and I thought maybe we could just jump into them now if Mohsen or Ankit can provide some answers, or you, Kasia, before you go. One of the questions that came in was, what would be the most effective way, and perhaps this is to Mohsen, but maybe the others as well, what would be the most effective way for leaders to support standards development?
Sure, great question. And I think the way I would answer this is what really kind of impede the acceleration of standardization is really availability of resources and technical expertise that can allow companies, can allow organizations, can allow to participate and contribute to this development. So leaders are essential part of the equation by allowing their technical experts being able to participate in the standard development, being able to actively influence, contribute, and progress these developments by sharing information that is possible to share. I think that that's a big solution to faster adoption of creation of standards and adoption of technologies. So, I mean, we get this question quite a lot, and I think if an organization from a high level doesn't believe or have the right mindset that the standards are a huge enabler into the supply chain, into the adoption of AM technology, obviously they don't allocate resources to their employees to be able to participate and contribute to standard development. I think to me that's the most effective way, being able to participate and get involved. So that's really the next step, I would say, in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Anyone else have any feedback into that?
I think one of the most important feedback for industry leaders for supporting standards is kind of advocating, because a lot of these industry leaders, all in their organizations are one way or the other already involved at this point. And I think sharing of information regards to material properties and testing would help the industry in general come up to a higher qualification level where standards could more easily be established on performance of materials coming out of these technologies.
Oh, that's excellent. There's another question here that comes out of, I think, all of the presentations, and this fits to the F42 standard where we describe multiple versions of the technology that fit within the additive manufacturing definition. But what tools or resources exist that might help a new entrant into the additive space to understand which are the, I'm going to put this in air quotes, best processes to invest in for my business? You both mentioned, or all of you mentioned, and anyone in the additive space will mention that so much is application driven. What are the requirements of your application? What is the output? the expected or necessary outputs. So could any of you speak to any of that?
Sure, I can start quickly with this. So what we do when we are dealing with potential clients and customers is we actually go through some of their parts and try to understand their requirements before recommending a process or an equipment over the other. So the way we do it is we kind of build what we call an ecotech matrix, and kind of we help do part selection and screening to basically, it does two things. One, it helps customers understand what their legacy applications are suitable for additive processes. And also other is it helps them even gain understanding that for future parts, what can and what parts or what features of those parts are essential to be, where additive can add value. So I think that is that's resource always existing. I think there are a number of universities actually running professional programs, and I think ASTM also through some of their existing conferences is an excellent resource to not only gain information from these presentations, but also network with the people that can help and mentor some of the new entrants in this business to actually gain foothold.
And this is Kasha at HP. I just think I agree with 100% what was just said, but the other piece I would add is something that I discussed in my presentation, which is sort of using the, looking at sort of a digital manufacturing network, and these service providers, right, can be another way before you are looking to adopt the technology and purchase it yourself. You could use these service providers to test out, better understand what kind of technologies you're looking for, the capabilities of what you're looking to do, and it's a nice way to sort of step into it without full investment on your part.
Absolutely, and I think we hear that a lot at America Makes at the various events and places. So anyone that is interested in getting into something, there are many service providers, whether they're America Makes members or they're available to the market space to help navigate the waters of the various types of technologies and the various types of materials that can be used. One question that came directly in here for Dr. Saharan, qualification of AM parts is complicated from the fact that all aspects of the supply chain, that is powder dynamics, process, material, and design, needs to be qualified at the same time. How is EOS addressing this issue as EOS is developing new material for AM manufacturing process?
So I think the question can be answered in two parts. The first one is whether all of this has to happen in the same time or not. I don't think it necessarily has to happen at the same time. It can happen in sequence where you can start with an existing, trying to qualify your machine from a hardware perspective and trying to qualify your individual parts. I wouldn't say that you would have to qualify your powder or material if you don't want to, because we have existing aerospace customers and even medical customers that basically audit material suppliers for consistency and quality, and basically just accept incoming certifications as part of a qualification process. Now, how we are targeting new materials when we bring to the fore is two ways. We offer qualification assistance to our customers where we do operational qualification with them, try and help them understand how consistent the machine is, how consistent machine to machine is, and also how consistent various lots of powder that are coming to the machines are as well. So that helps create a benchmark and create a process, quality process that helps the customer understand what the process, what the quality level needs to be. In addition to that, there are a lot of other requirements like control charts, process FMEAs, process control documents that EOS can definitely assist with from an additive standpoint. Now, for the new materials, the way we do is that whenever we bring a new material, we kind of bring it to the same TRL level that Mohsen was earlier referring to a slide, where we test a material basically across a predefined set of matrix. So, for example, we could test every new material across, let's say, 3 different machines and 3 different material batches. So that would basically be what we typically do is we create 3 builds across 3 machines, across 3 different powder lots. That basically is about 27 builds that we do as part of this validation and verification that helps us gain confidence in the process and test its robustness.
That's excellent. And I think that when an important concept like that question poses with a lot of complicated parts of it, it's important that you take that time and take those steps to be sure, especially in any type of critical components. One of the things that we just got another question here regarding the American Makes Government Relations Advisory Group, and I think Kasia may have had to drop off. I know she had another commitment. But perhaps Tiffany or someone else could answer this if they're able. The America Makes Government Relations Advisory Group sounds like a valuable resource. How would an organization learn more about their activities or get directly involved? And because Kasia dropped off, I'm not sure that we have the direct answer for that, but I would suggest if anyone is interested on the call in getting more involved to reach out directly to Tiffany Westbay, who's our host on this call today. She's our membership director at America Makes. You could also reach out to me. My email address, I believe, will pop up here in a moment. And I can help direct you to the appropriate individuals and working group members to get folks involved. There are actually, speaking of the Government Relations Advisory Group, there are other working groups within America Makes, specifically focused on various topics related to this, and it's part of the America Makes mission to accelerate the adoption of additive in the United States, and by bringing the community together through these working groups and advisory groups, it allows the voice of technology, the voice of government, the voice of nonprofits, the voice of academia to come together and be convened to be heard and address many of these concerns. With that, I think there might be a few other questions that have popped up. We are running a little short on time. We're 7 past the hour here into the 2 o'clock hour. One other question just relating to the learning curve of getting into AM, time and cost estimate is the question. Certainly, the folks on the call have a lot of expertise, and the folks at America Makes do as well. And it's probably difficult for anyone to put a quantitative value on what is the learning curve of getting into AM. But certainly it is real. But it is also something that can be overcome. It's not mysterious science. These are many things that we understand and can train and educate folks on. So does anyone have any answers to a question such as that? What is the learning curve of getting into AM?
So, Scott, I'd just like to quickly say that it's, from my side, what I've seen is that there are a number of training packages that's offered by different OEMs from universities and from even outside consulting agencies that can help a customer understand where the training is and what the learning curve is going to be and how they want to get started in the additive journey. What I've felt is that instead of just taking a training class and trying to put a number, the more successful route is that actually talk to somebody and come up with a specific issue or a problem or an application you want to target. Because you're going to learn so much and you're going to ramp up so fast by just attacking a problem rather than taking a generic class. That's there's a hard to put a price on that. Like you put it right that way, that it's difficult to quantify this number and what the learning curve needs to be. But if you have a specific problem and you get to work closely with one of the experienced people in the industry, that's something, a valuable resource, and I don't think you can put a price on that.
No, that's a terrific answer, because I think that so many times you can learn as much as you can about the technology, but if there's only a small sliver of it that is really going to solve your specific need, or satisfy your specific need, or solve your problem, or bring the value of AM into your organization, try to find that avenue that focuses specifically on that. Many of the manufacturers, as you mentioned, offer training packages, or offer, seminars and webinars and things. America Makes certainly does a good deal of that, partnering with industry and other training providers to get people where they need to be. There's also the point that you never actually stop learning. The more you learn about additive, the more you learn that there's more to learn. And it is wonderful and amazing. And it's also an amazing technology, because there are so many people that are passionate about bringing it forward. And I know from being around the industry for many years, we see many of the same faces and many of the same industry partners at various events. And there's a lot of collaboration that goes on. There's certainly marketplace competition, but there's a lot of people helping each other adopt this technology, and America Makes is one of those organizations that's part of that. So I think we're going to kind of leave it at that. If there are any additional questions, we can try to answer them via emails post-event. I want to thank everyone for sticking it out and hanging in there. We still have quite a few people that have stayed on, even though we're past our time. I want to thank our presenters from ASTM and from EOS North America, and from HP. Anyone that is interested, it's on the call, that would be interested in knowing more about America Makes, please check us out at americamakes.us on the web. You can learn more about the TRX webinar series on that website. You can also take a look at our YouTube channel and review previous episodes of the TRX webinar series. And we look forward to engaging with you further and accelerating the adoption of additive in the US. So with that, I'll bid you all good day, and thank you once again. Bye now.